By the late 70s, Jerry Garcia was playing music almost every night. Huge arenas, thousands of people, the Grateful Dead at the height of their powers. But Jerry Garcia wasn't free. He was trapped in what he called a controlled situation. Massive venues, high ticket prices, heavy security. He was removed from the audience, removed from the music, and there was, in his words, nowhere to go. This is how a basement in Mill Valley, California became the only place Jerry Garcia could breathe, and how a mandolin player named David Grisman gave him an escape hatch that lasted until the day Garcia died. October 1974. The Grateful Dead announced a hiatus. Not a breakup, a break. And if you listen to what Garcia was saying in interviews around that time, the reason becomes clear. He wasn't burned out on music, he was burned out on the machine that music had become. Large venues with high ticket prices, heavy security everywhere, playing gigs that barely covered the cost of moving the band and crew from city to city. Garcia described the whole thing as dehumanizing. Phil Lesh, the Dead's bassist, said it even more bluntly. The big arenas separated them from their audience and created tension. They weren't connecting anymore, they were just performing. Garcia started fantasizing about building a permanent performance space, somewhere the Dead could just stay, so he wouldn't have to tour, so he could have something resembling a normal life. One of the most famous musicians in America was daydreaming about not being famous anymore. When the Dead came back from that hiatus, it didn't get better, it got worse. 1986, Garcia fell into a diabetic coma. He almost died. When he recovered and the Dead started touring again, they weren't just big anymore, they were massive. Stadium massive. Commercial juggernaut massive. The kind of success most bands dream about. For Garcia, it was a nightmare with better production values. Every show required an industrial apparatus to function. Crews, logistics, sound systems so loud Garcia couldn't hear his own voice. He was exhausted. His hearing was deteriorating. His vocal cords were strained, and the sheer volume, that dense wall of sound coming from the stage, it buried him. Grisman would later point out that in the Dead's mix, Jerry could barely hear himself at all. So Garcia was stuck. The Grateful Dead needed him, the crew needed paychecks, the fans needed shows, and Jerry Garcia needed out. That's where David Grisman comes in. Garcia and Grisman went way back. 1964, they met at a bluegrass show in West Grove, Pennsylvania. Two kids who loved traditional American folk music, jamming in a parking lot. 6 years later, Grisman played mandolin on some of the Dead's most iconic tracks, Ripple and Friend of the Devil from American Beauty. And in 1973, they formed Old and in the Way with Peter Rowan, John Kahn, and Vassar Clements. That band played about 25 shows over a few months before it dissolved in early '74. Great music, but the business side was a mess. And then, nothing. For over a decade, Garcia and Grisman barely spoke. Old and in the Way had sold well, the live album went gold eventually, but Grisman never got paid. Money got weird, people drifted, until 1990. The Rex Foundation, the Dead's charitable arm, gave Grisman a grant. When Grisman found out Garcia was behind it, he called to thank him. They made a date to get together at Grisman's house, and Garcia showed up with his acoustic guitar. He walked right in and said, "We should make a record. That'll give us a reason to play." Not a commercial venture, not a comeback. Garcia wanted to hang out with an old friend, and making a record was the justification. Grisman had just finished building a new basement studio at his house in Mill Valley. Small, intimate, the opposite of everything the Grateful Dead had become. Grisman asked when he wanted to start. Garcia said, "Now." They had their first tune, Louis Collins, in the can before Grisman's engineer could even arrive. No plan, no agenda, just two guys playing music because they felt like it. That spontaneity was what Garcia needed. Garcia's life with the Dead was the opposite. Months of tour dates planned in advance, set lists, sound checks, crew schedules, contractual obligations, security concerns. Every show was an operation. Every performance required an army of people to make it happen. Grisman's basement in Mill Valley required none of that. Sessions started when Garcia showed up. They ended when the music stopped. No crew hierarchy, no contractual momentum, no pressure beyond the music itself. Garcia later described these sessions as a rich experience where he got to be one of the guys. Not the leader, not the icon, just one of the guys. And musically, Grisman didn't lower the bar. He's a perfectionist. Garcia said he was a real live wire and kind of a perfectionist. And if you know anything about dog music, you know Grisman doesn't do sloppy. He challenged Garcia. He pushed him. But he did it in a room where the only thing that mattered was whether the music felt good. Grisman wasn't therapy. He was an equal partner who happened to offer Garcia something the Dead couldn't. A way to play music without the weight of an empire on his back. And it wasn't just in his head. By the early 90s, Garcia's body was breaking down. The Dead's arena volume was punishing. His voice was getting buried in the mix. Hearing deteriorating. and he was constantly exhausted. Standing on stage with a massive sound system blasting at you, you can't hear yourself think, let alone sing. But in Grisman's basement, sparse instrumentation, controlled monitoring, acoustic instruments, Grisman said that freed from the Dead's dense sound, Jerry could hear his voice real well in the headphones. There was an exuberance in his voice. Exuberance. Late era Jerry Garcia and exuberance aren't words you usually hear in the same sentence. His voice came back. His confidence came back. He could hear himself again, literally and creatively. These sessions weren't just emotionally sustainable. They were physically sustainable in ways Dead touring absolutely was not. Over the next 5 years, Garcia and Grisman recorded dozens of sessions together. In 1991, they released Garcia, i.e. Grisman, an all-acoustic album that blended dog music with traditional tunes. The album cover shows them in silhouette with their instruments. Quiet, understated. 1993, they released Not for Kids Only, a collection of children's folk songs. That same year, they went public in a way they'd never done before. September 15th, they performed on The Late Show with David Letterman. 2 days later, they did a live broadcast from NPR studios in New York. Small room, intimate setting. They played Shady Grove, Jenny Jenkins, and So What? The recordings show exactly what Grisman was talking about. You can hear Garcia's voice. Really hear it. The delicate interplay between guitar and mandolin. Two people having a conversation through their instruments. In the documentary Grateful Dog, there's footage of Garcia in the studio, looking out the window. Just looking. Jillian Grisman, David's daughter who directed the film, says it was her father's favorite shot because it captured something rare. Garcia at rest, Garcia at peace, free of the machinery, because this wasn't a stylistic detour or a throwback to Garcia's roots. Grisman's basement was the inverse. It was human scale, it was optional, it was free. The Grateful Dead made Jerry Garcia immortal, but Grisman's basement made him human. 1994 and 95, the sessions continued. They recorded the material that would become the Shady Grove album, and then there were the pizza tapes. Literally sessions that happened on pizza nights when Garcia, Grisman, and Tony Rice would get together, eat pizza, and just play. Those recordings weren't meant for release. They were documentation of friendship. But they became legendary among fans because you could hear the joy in them. The frequency of the sessions, Grisman said, was partly because they lived near each other and partly because of the new studio. But really, it was because Garcia needed this. Not wanted, needed. Less than a month before Jerry Garcia died, he recorded one last song with David Grisman, Blue Yodel No. 9, a Jimmy Rogers tune, for a Bob Dylan tribute album of all things. Simple, traditional, the kind of music they'd bonded over 30 years earlier in a parking lot in Pennsylvania. Grisman didn't know it was the last time. Garcia probably didn't either. But that's how it ended. Not on a stadium stage in front of thousands, but in a basement with an old friend playing the music they'd always loved. The Garcia/Grisman sessions didn't save Jerry Garcia's life. Garcia's health was deteriorating. His lifestyle was unsustainable. A basement studio and a mandolin player couldn't fix that. But for 5 years, Jerry Garcia had a place where he could breathe, where he wasn't the icon or the center of gravity for an empire. He was just Jerry, playing music with his friend David. The Grateful Dead gave us Dark Star and Terrapin Station and American Beauty and decades of legendary shows. They gave us a cultural movement. They gave us magic. But David Grisman gave Jerry Garcia something the Dead never could,